Well, welcome this morning to the gathering. You guys looking good this morning. Now, for those of you how many of you know the story of Jonah? Heard that before? Most people. Most people wouldn't hear the story of Jonah or read the story of Jonah and just automatically think, well, that's about provision, right? How many, where are my Sunday school kids back, felt board Jesus? Who learned about Jesus on a felt board? Yeah. I remember felt board Jesus as a little boy, and the teacher puts little Jonah up there. Here's Jonah, and Jonah runs from God, and here's the whale, and now look, Jonah's in the whale, and the felt board. And what did we learn? Well, okay, don't run from God or else you'll end up in a whale. So that was the lesson of Jonah and the big fish, or Jonah in the whale. So last few weeks back when Pastor John told me I was going to be teaching this weekend for week 5 of Jireh, I prayed and I asked God, I said, okay, God, you're going to have to provide a message on provision. So I prayed, God, what do you want me to talk about? And he said, talk about Jonah. And I said, well, wait a minute, Jonah, that's about this guy, he runs from you. It's about this storm and these ships and ends up in a whale in this place called Tarshish. And Tarshish is really hard to say, and I don't want to stand up there in front of a bunch of people and have to say Tarshish a bunch of times. Tarshish is hard to say. Say Tarshish. Yeah, it is. Tarshish. Yeah, Tarshish. It's hard to say. And I didn't want to do that, so I prayed again. I said, God, provide a message about provision. He said, I told you, go to Jonah. And I was like, okay, God, I tell you what, I'll read Jonah, and I'll come back, and I'll tell you what I think, right? Funny how we do that with God. But I read Jonah chapter 1, which we just read together, and I couldn't believe there's provision all throughout this chapter. There's provision all throughout it, and it doesn't jump right off the page right away. But how many of you know that sometimes that's how God's provision is? Sometimes it's a little hard to see God's provision. Sometimes God's provision seems like maybe it's not there. It's not obvious in our life. And yet God's provision has been there the entire time. And that's kind of like this story that I read today. Sometimes God's provision in our life seems a little peculiar. Anybody agree with that? Seems a little peculiar. That's the title of the message today, is Peculiar Provision. Today we're going to look at 3 different types of provision that God showed me this week through the story and the life of Jonah. And some of it is a little peculiar. So we're going to dig right in this morning. The first type of provision that God showed me is this, a pointing provision. Say pointing provision. Sometimes God's provision points us to a place where he wants us to go. Look at verse 1. It says, the word of the Lord came to Jonah. Right there, one verse in, boom, provision. The word of the Lord came to Jonah. And then in verse 2, it points. It says, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it because its wickedness has come up before me. So verse 1, there it is, provision. God's provision has showed up. His word is provision. How many know that God's word is provision today? God's word is provision today. And it pointed Jonah to God's will for his life, for the mission that God had for Jonah. It pointed him to go to Nineveh and preach against it. But too often in our life, sometimes God will send us a provision and point us in a certain direction. And sometimes we don't follow that point. We don't follow that provision. And sometimes it's because we're a little afraid that maybe we read him wrong, right? Maybe God isn't really pointing us in that direction. Maybe we have a little fear or a little doubt. If we head out in that direction that God just sent us in, is he really going to come through for us today? Sometimes we search for what God has already given us through this scripture, through these scriptures that we have of the word of God. Sometimes we're searching for the answer and it's right here in front of us. Do we really consider this to be provision? Do we really believe that the Bible is provision for our life? Do we believe, LaMonica, that Psalm 119, 105 that says, this is the lamp unto my feet and the light unto my path? Do we believe that this morning? Do we believe in 2 Timothy 3:16 that says that all scripture is God-breathed and useful for teaching, for correcting, for rebuking, and for training in righteousness so that we can be fully prepared for every good work that God has for us? Do we believe that today? Do we believe in Hebrews 4:12 that says that this word is alive and active and it's sharper than any two-edged sword, that it can cut straight through the bone and the marrow, through the soul and the spirit? Do we believe that this morning? Do we believe in Matthew 4:4 where Jesus told us not to live by bread alone, but to live by every word out of the mouth of God? This book is provision today. Sometimes we pray for God. We hope God provides. God, how many times have you said it? God, you got to show up. I hope God provides. I hope God provides. Asking and hoping for God to provide is kind of hoping like ice is going to be cold or that sugar is going to be sweet. Because we need to realize today that God is provision. He doesn't just simply provide, but he is provision. Our God, who is provision, will provide. Amen? For Jonah, God sent him a word and it was pointed at that mission that he had for his life. In verse 2, go to Nineveh and preach against it. Jonah didn't see it that way though. Jonah got this pointed provision from God, and Jonah didn't see a pointed provision. Jonah saw a problem provision. It's interesting how God sent a pointed provision, and yet Jonah received a problem provision. And I wonder today how many of us in this room or watching online have received a pointed provision from God, and we've labeled it a problem. Amen. I know I've done it. I know I've done it. And here's the thing. We would rather, in our human nature, we would rather have prevision than trust in God's provision. Anybody else, or am I just alone? I'd rather be able to see what God's gonna do. I'd rather be able to see how this all ends, even if it's bad sometimes. I don't like that middle space of not knowing what's gonna happen. I'd rather be able to see the end and be able to, within my own understanding, navigate the path that I know is coming than sit there and just trust that God is going to provide. And that's how we are sometimes. You know, for Jonah, that problem that kept him from trusting in the pointed provision of God might have been fear. You know, God told him to go to Nineveh. Now, Nineveh, if you study this, some scholars believe that the city of Nineveh would have been the largest city in the world at that time. So modern day, it would be like if God told us, hey, go to Tokyo. There's 37.5 million people that live in Tokyo. So that'd be like God saying, go to Tokyo. And he says, go to Nineveh because what? Its wickedness has come up against me. It doesn't say exactly what that wickedness was. But if you read the way that God talks about and deals with, not only here, but also go read Nahum. You want to talk about how when God says, I am against you, the way that he thinks of Nineveh, they were into some weird, wild stuff. That's all I'm going to say. And the way that he deals with them is very similar. There's a lot of lines of comparison to Nineveh as to how God talked about and dealt with Sodom and Gomorrah. So they were into some weird stuff. So the largest city in the world, combined with some people that are into some weird, wild stuff, you can begin to understand maybe a more complete understanding of what would make Jonah have some fleeting feelings. You know, maybe the bad rap we put on Jonah, maybe we need to, stop judging Jonah a little bit. Because I know some of us are judging Jonah this morning. I mean, nobody in this room is judging Jonah. I do know that because judgmental people don't come to church. But for the benefit of the one or two people that are watching online today, I know you're judging Jonah. And I just want to say, aren't we sometimes like that? Don't we do the same thing? I mean, we'd rather have that prevision than trusting God's provision. Even when God points and he makes it clear to us, you'd think we'd be able to trust in that, but sometimes we don't. We want to rely on our own self, our own understanding, and we just succumb to that. And sometimes we even turn and run away. Sometimes we even turn and run away from what God has pointed us to do. And that's exactly what Jonah did. Look at verse 3. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish, went down to Joppa where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and he sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Now, there's 3 cities now that we've heard about, plus one more that I want you to know about. So we're going to put a map up here. So this story starts in a place called Gath Hepher. Say Gath Hepher. All right, that is Jonah's hometown. We know that from 2 Kings chapter 14. That is where this story begins. Now, God sends a pointed provision to Jonah, and he says, I want you to go to Nineveh. And there's Nineveh. It's about 500 or 600 miles away. Now, Gath-Hepher would have been kind of an insignificant village, just a small little village, nothing much going on in Gath-Hepher. Nineveh, we already talked about it. Biggest city in the world at the time. It's actually the site of modern day Mosul, Iraq, is where Nineveh sat in Bible times. So he said, go 500 or 600 miles away, go preach against it. But we know Jonah didn't do that. Instead, he went down to Joppa. Put Joppa on the map. All right, that's about 60 miles away from Gath-Hepher. But notice, it's in the exact opposite direction from where God pointed his provision. You know, he didn't head towards Nineveh and go to another town. No. He went the exact opposite direction, 60 miles to Joppa. And he boarded a boat, and check this out, he went all the way on his way to Tarshish. Put Tarshish on the map. That's where he was headed. Woo! That's where he was headed. That's a long way. That's 2,500 miles from where God pointed his provision. Now, at Bible times, that was believed to be almost the end of the world at that point. Like, that's as far as someone could go, and that's where Jonah was headed. You can't go any farther than Tarshish. Here is where God's calling was, in Nineveh. And here's where Jonah's choices took him. A long way from where God had called him. So today, what are we going to choose today? You see what Jonah chose. What are we going to choose today? Are we going to follow God's calling? Or are we going to follow our choices? And the truth is, in this day and age, we got way too many choices, y'all. Woo, we got way too many choices. All you have to do to know how many choices and how ridiculous it is go to the cracker aisle. Anybody been to the cracker aisle lately? Okay, back in my day, I know I sound like an old man now. Back in my day, if you wanted a box of Triscuits, you know what you bought? A box of Triscuits. That's what you bought. But traditional woven wheat apparently doesn't hit the spot anymore. We got to have more choices. I got a picture of what I saw the other day in the cracker aisle. There are 24 varieties of Triscuits. I mean, do you want it with low salt, no salt, sea salt? You want it to taste like tzatziki? You can get a cracker to taste like anything. I mean, back in the day, we just put what we wanted it to taste like on the cracker. Here, Brutus, are you hungry? Oh, LaMonica, you want some? Okay, LaMonica she's hungry. We got too many choices in our life. And the scary thing is, there was a recent study that came out that suggested that we make over 3,500 choices every day. That's a lot of choices. But the scariest thing about that is that we really don't make as many choices ourselves as we think we're making, because of a little thing called artificial intelligence. Anybody know what artificial intelligence is? Some of you may work in a field where you use artificial intelligence to help with marketing or anything like that. And we'll give you an opportunity to repent later on. But here's the thing, artificial intelligence, I'll use Netflix as an example. Who's got a Netflix account? I'd use Facebook, but they'd shut off the feed. So I'll just stick with Netflix. Do you know that 80% of what we watch on Netflix is controlled by artificial intelligence? Isn't that crazy? Think about it. When you start a Netflix account, first thing you do, you put your email in, and then it asks you some questions like, what do you like? What do you like? Oh, I like drama, and I like comedy, I like action movies. If you're my wife, she'd click the button that says, I like zombie movies. Pray for my wife, she likes zombie movies. But we give them this information, and then what do? They use it to start developing a feed for us, recommended for you, And we've given them all this information. And then they use some psychology against us. They use this thing called social proof, which essentially is their top 10 list. They've got a top 10 list now. You go on there and it says, here's the top 10 things that people are watching today. Well, if it's number one, it must be good. Right, Tori? It's got to be good if all these people are watching it. But my favorite thing that they do, this is the coup de grace. This is my favorite thing that they do, is they control the thumbnails on your Netflix account. Did you know that? Have you ever noticed that you'll be watching and then you're like, oh, the thumbnail for my favorite show, it changed. You know that they're controlling that based on what you're watching? That's crazy. It's crazy. Now there's this show, who's seen Stranger Things? Okay, I've never seen it. My daughter and wife and kids watch it, but I've never seen the show, but I do have the hat. I think it's Dustin that wears this hat in the show. They got me this for my birthday a few years ago. But Stranger Things is a Netflix original show, and if you like to watch scary movies, kind of like gory movies, things that'll get your blood pumping, this is the thumbnail that you might have for Stranger Things. It's a little scary, right? You got the eerie woods. Now, if you like nostalgic shows, if you like coming of age shows, this is what your thumbnail may look like. Ooh, see what I mean? If, let's say that you love just, puppy love, teenage love. I'm young and I'm in love and this is what your thumbnail might look like. So they use this to develop a feed that is more desirable for you, this artificial intelligence. Netflix uses our activity against us, it uses our history against us, and it uses our desires against us. But would you know the irony of all that is that's not a new tactic. It's not a new tactic. In fact, Satan has been employing this very same tactic from day one. James 1:14 tells us this. Each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desires and enticed. We give him our playbook. He knows. It's like Netflix. He knows. Now it's interesting. Get back to our story. It's interesting that Jonah he chooses. He wants to head to Tarshish, but he doesn't go there right away. Where does he go? He goes to Joppa. He goes 60 miles south to Joppa. And it's interesting that he didn't leave straight from Gath Hepher and just take off, right? He just went a little bit outside of God's will. He didn't run 2,500 miles away. He didn't wake up one morning and go, all right, I'm out of here. Poof. He left, but he just went a little bit. Just a little bit. And maybe you've never boarded a boat and headed to Tarshish. And if you haven't, God bless you. God bless you if you've never boarded a boat and headed to Tarshish. But I bet if we're honest today, we've been to Joppa. I bet if we're honest today, we've gone window shopping in Joppa. Anybody ever window shopped in Joppa? We take a little jaunt down to Joppa because we need to know, just in case we need a backup plan, or just in case we want to see what Joppa's all about. We need to know what time the ships leave. We need to know how much it costs to board a boat down in Joppa. And so we go down to Joppa. We've been to Joppa. You know, Joppa is like a gateway drug to our runaway from God. We just go down to Joppa. We're hanging out in Joppa. What are some Joppas today? What's your Joppa today? It might be that rated R movie with the sex scenes while your wife's sleeping, right? You know, I don't need to fast forward through that. It's just a little bit. It's just a little bit outside of what God wants me to do. Could be drinks with the guys. I'm going to go out with the guys, have a few drinks. I'm going to tell my wife I'm working late. It's just a little bit. It's just a little white lie. She'll never know. I'm going to go hang out with the guys. Maybe I'm going to buy this one thing. I'm going to hide the receipt. My husband doesn't need to know that I bought that. It's just this one little thing. It's just one little thing. Maybe I'm going to gossip. I'm going to gossip this one time. I'm going to disparage that person this one time. I'm just going to step a little bit outside of God's will. Maybe it's porn. I'm just going to watch it once because I can stop tomorrow. It's just a little bit outside of what, it's these lies that we believe down in Joppa. Maybe it's a pill. I'm going to take this pill one time. I need it to get through today. Tomorrow's a different day. I won't need it tomorrow. And we tell ourselves these lies. Friends, we have to stay away from Joppa. We have to stay away from Joppa. Why? Because we are drug away to Joppa by our own evil desires. And then if you keep reading in James, it says, then after that desire has conceived, after we go down to Joppa, we give into those evil desires, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Friends, I love this quote. Sin will take you further than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, and it will charge you more than you want to pay. We got to stay away from Joppa. It's those little bits, just a little bit outside of God's will, down in Joppa, that get us into trouble. And here's the thing about Joppa is that it was a city port, right? So Jonah goes down there. He wants to leave for Tarshish. You get to Tarshish, it's a city port. All these people are coming and going. Everybody's doing it. Other people are boarding the boat and headed for Tarshish. Other people are boarding boats and going all over the place. It was a lot easier to talk himself into actually paying the fare and getting on the boat once he was surrounded with people that didn't care about him. It was a place he didn't know, surrounded by people he didn't know. They didn't care about Jonah's best for his life. And so it was a lot easier for him. I guess it's not that big of a deal. I'll just get on the boat. And that's the danger of our Joppa Jaunts in life. That's the danger. We have to, when God points his provision, we have to step in a direction. Even if it's just one step, take a step in that direction of the pointed provision and see what God does from there. If God's called you in that direction, he will provide all the way to that place where he's called you to. Amen? Well, God provides a pointing provision, and then also God provides a second kind of provision, and that is a purposed provision. We see this in this story. Often God will provide a very specific, very purposeful provision in our life, and maybe it's even just meant to accomplish something one time, or maybe very specifically in our life. We're going to read in verse 4. It says this: "Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep." Verse 4, it says that the Lord sent the storm. Some of you all might be thinking, now wait a minute. There's this verse and it says that every good and perfect thing comes from God. So how could the Lord send a storm? Well, let me ask you this. Can we agree that, or could we maybe say that a storm could have a good and perfect purpose? A storm that God sends can have a good and perfect purpose. So in Jonah, in this story that we see, what was the purpose of that storm that God sent? Was it to scare Jonah? Was it to kill Jonah? Was he going to punish Jonah? No. The storm that God sent Jonah was to wake Jonah up. To wake him up. Now we know he was where? He was down below deck sleeping, right? He was down below the deck sleeping. But I would argue, and I think many of you would too, that he's probably been asleep spiritually for a long time. You don't just wake up one day and decide you're going to run from God. There's many small trips to Joppa that take you to the place where you want to run 2,500 miles away from God. And so I would say that he had been asleep spiritually for quite a long time. Who'd be honest this morning and say, I'm going through a storm right now? Raise your hand. If you're watching us online, type it in the chat, say, I'm going through a storm. Maybe it's a health issue. It could be a job loss. It could be family drama. It could be a wayward child. It could be drama at work, a boss you can't stand, a coworker you can't stand. Maybe it's a situation in your life that just isn't fair. It's just not fair, and I'm going through this storm. Come on, God. It's not fair. Or maybe it's a provision issue. Maybe there's a provision issue in your life and you just don't know how it's all gonna work out. You just don't understand how in the world I see it through my eyes, and God, I'm trying, but I can't see it through your eyes. So what do we do sometimes? We close our eyes and we hide out below deck because we can't handle the storm. We close our eyes, we go down below deck, and the storm that was purposed for a specific purpose, we miss the point because we're down below deck with our eyes closed, sleeping. We don't learn from the storm. The purpose of that provision was to change our path. But the problem is we never learn, and we just keep ending up getting on the same boat, headed for the same place over and over and over in our life. We see the storm as a problem rather than a purpose provision, and we just focus on riding the storm out. I'm just gonna get through this storm and I'll be good. But the problem is we never learn from the storm. We don't know what the storm was about. What is the purpose? Are we willing to see the storm that we're walking through today as a purposed provision instead of a problem? That's hard to do. But what would happen if we were willing to open our eyes and see the purpose of the provision of the storm that we're in? What is God trying to teach us in the storm we're in right now? What is God trying to awaken inside of us in this storm? For Jonah, like I said, God was trying to wake him up. What's the purpose provision in the storm you're in today? What's the purpose provision in the storm that I'm in today? And will we be waken up? I got to think that some of the storms that we're experiencing in our country right now are purpose provisions. And here's the thing, for a long time in this country, I'm sorry, but we've been asleep. We've been asleep. And now we wake up in a culture where Christian values are counterculture to what's going on in our world. How did we get there? How did we get there to where if you're a Christian, you stick out like a sore thumb? I mean, how did we get there? Something that was once the cornerstone of our country, these Judeo-Christian values are not there anymore. And in some respect, we've kind of acquiesced, we've stepped aside, we've just kind of let it happen. Roe v. Wade, 1973, it's just abortion, we'll be okay. We'll just sleep through that storm. God's saying, wake up. Wake up. How many times does God have to send the same storm before we wake up, before we stand up for what we believe in, before we give a reason for the hope that we have? Friends, we are holders of hope. We're holders of light. And the Bible tells us we need to be ready to give a reason for that hope. We need to focus on being the church and not just coming to church. Not just being a consumer Christian and showing up once a month, tipping God, throwing a 20 in the offering plate, but being the church, out loving the world, out serving the world. We need to be the church. 1 Peter 2:9 says, but you are a chosen people. You're a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Friends, we are carriers of that light, and we need to stand up and be the church that God has called us to be. Amen? Well, back to our story. Jonah is in the middle of the storm. He's asleep. The captain comes down, wakes him up. What in the world are you doing asleep? You got to wake up, pray to your God. Jonah says, well, hey, it's my fault that this is all happening. Just throw me overboard. They don't do it right away. The storm gets crazier and crazier. And finally, they throw Jonah overboard. And then in verse 17, it says this, now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah. Are you kidding, God? The Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah. Jehovah Jireh. You are Jireh. Man, Jehovah Jireh, he provided a big fish to swallow Jonah. He could have provided anything he wanted. He could have provided another ship. He could have provided a canoe or an average sized rowboat, assuming that he could fit in the average sized rowboat. He could have given him a piece of driftwood. Anything he could have sent, but the Lord provided a huge fish. The never-changing, eternal, powerful, all-knowing, all-powerful God provided him a huge fish to serve as what? What had to feel like a prison to Jonah. How did it feel in there? I mean, it was dark, damp, smelled like rotten fish guts. I mean, he's like covered in kelp and seaweed. Just sitting there in this tight space. It had to have felt like a prison sentence, but it wasn't a prison sentence for Jonah. See, it was another one of God's peculiar provisions. That brings us to point 3. This provision was a preparation provision. 17b, Jonah was in the belly. Had to feel like prison. Was he sentenced to prison? No, he was sentenced to preparation. He was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Friends, what feels like a prison sentence in your situation today may be preparation for what God wants to do tomorrow. You see, God sent that fish to swallow Jonah, and it felt like a prison, but it was really a preparation for what God wanted to do in his life. In fact, what God wanted to do in chapter 3. And that provision that seemed like a prison, that was really a preparation, brought Jonah to a place where I imagine in the belly of the fish, he was on his knees crying out to God, saying, God, I'm sorry. I ran from you. Don't forget about me. I want to serve you. And he recommits his vow to God within the belly of the fish. It was a preparation. God knew he needed some preparation for what God sent him to do in chapter 3. So at the end of chapter 2, the whale spits him out. The big fish spits him out onto dry land. And chapter 3 happens. And here's a spoiler alert. I wish I had time to teach on it because it's so fun. The spoiler alert, Jonah gets a do-over. Jonah gets a second chance. Jonah goes to Nineveh. He goes to Nineveh. In fact, Jonah 3, 1-3. It's going to seem repetitive. Verse 1, then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. This is chapter 3. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you. Man, we've been here before. Sounds a lot like episode 1, right? Sounds a lot like season 1, episode 1. Except there's a difference this time because verse 3, Jonah obeyed. Jonah obeyed. God gave him a second chance. How many are thankful for the chapter 3s in our life? How many need a chapter 3 in their life today? We see this reckless love, like Pastor David talked about, this reckless love of God that he left the 99 of y'all who are all doing the things right, and he went across an entire ocean just so that Jonah wouldn't drown. And he saved him. And not only did he save him, but he prepared him for the next stage in his ministry. And you know what? Jonah went to Nineveh, and there was a revival in Nineveh. And God spared the entire city. Friends, I am so thankful for the chapter 3s. So thankful for the chapter 3s that God does in our life. We don't deserve it. We couldn't earn it. But he still gives us our chapter 3s. Friends, it would be a lot easier for me to just end this right now, just say a prayer, have you guys go out to the lobby. Some of you probably are wishing I would. Let's be honest. No, it would be a lot easier for me to just tell you, hey, here's a story on Jonah. He ran from God. Don't do what he did. Have a good day. That'd be fun. It'd be a lot more easy for me. But it'd be easy for me to point to Jonah's Joppa Jaunt than to talk about the Joppa Jaunts in my own life. See, because the truth is I've been to Joppa and I've boarded a boat for Tarshish. I've been on my way to Tarshish, friends. I was done with God. I was done with the church. Done with church people. You know Aaron and I's story. My wife has shared it from this platform before. Many of you know our story. But we've been to Joppa. We boarded that boat. We headed for Tarshish. We made decisions that hurt people, hurt the church, hurt God. It made decisions that affected us in a way that we were hurt. There's a lot of hurt going on. And we boarded that boat. We headed for Tarshish. We were done. We're done with God. Almost 4 years we were on that boat, headed for Tarshish. Just hanging out in the middle of the ocean. And we were never coming back. We were never, ever coming back. But who knows that there's nothing that can separate you from the love of God. God will never stop pursuing you, even if you run away. Even if you run away, God will never stop pursuing you. And God pursued us in the form of a storm. He likes to do that. About 3 years ago, actually 3 years next month, our youngest son, Aaron and I have a big blended family. We've got 9 kids between us, but our youngest son, Maxwell, he'll be turning 3 next month. And we're in the middle of the ocean on the way to Tarshish when God sent us a storm. And his name was Maxwell. See, Max was born with some rare genetic disorders. He had a complete bilateral cleft palate of his soft and his hard palate. Basically, you see the picture from where his teeth were all the way back to his throat. Nothing was there. He couldn't, if you're a baby, you need to basically be able to do three things: suck, swallow, and breathe. Because to eat, you got to suck, swallow, and breathe. Max could do none of those. He couldn't create suction with his mouth. He couldn't breathe. And to make matters worse, his jaw was recessed and his tongue actually sat really far back in his throat. And so you'd just be holding Max and all of a sudden he'd just stop breathing because his tongue would cover his airway. You couldn't lay him down at night. Spent the first year with Erin sleeping upright with Max on her shoulder just so that he wouldn't pass away in his sleep. It was a storm. When you begin to hear doctors and nurses talk about your son and say things like failure to thrive, man, it starts to wake you up. That's a picture of Max. That doesn't even do it justice. That's how we had to feed him. It looks like I'm choking him out or something. But we had to hold him up like that because that's the only way that we could get him to eat. But the thing was that he would eat and he would actually expel more calories eating than he would from what he was getting. And so he was just losing weight. And so there we were, Erin and I, in the midst of this storm. We're in the midst of sea. We didn't have any of you in our life. We had nowhere to turn. We were angry. And we had a choice at that moment. We could have gone below deck and fallen asleep, or we could have woken up. And I thank God that we woke up in that storm. I thank God. And I'm convinced that God used Max to save our lives. We've talked about it all the time, Aaron. God used Max to save our lives. God began to change my heart. God began to change my wife's heart. And then God said something really funny through a series of events that could only be God's craziness. He said, you're going to go to the gathering. Take your wife, take your family, and go to the gathering. Now, for those of you that don't know, that would be like Jonah going back to his Joppa. That was as close to my Joppa as I could get. And God said, go to the gathering. And I said, well, wait a minute, God, they know me there. They know me. I'll go heal somewhere else. And God said, I can restore you wherever you want to go, but here's the truth. There's a refining fire that will only burn hot at the gathering. You want a chapter 3? We're going to have to go through some stuff. And I'm going to tell you, coming to the gathering in the beginning, it felt like a prison. It wasn't always fun having to deal with some of the things that, we needed to deal with. And so here's the truth though. Looking back on what felt like a prison in my life and a prison in my wife's life, we cannot see anything but provision looking back. It was a preparation. What God did over those 3 years of us being here at the gathering, he has prepared our hearts, God willing, for the chapter 3s and the chapter 4s that we have coming. And we had to walk through that fire so that God could prepare our hearts. Man, we don't deserve it. We don't deserve it at all. But thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus, that he woke us up in that storm, amen? And listen, we don't have it all figured out. Our life isn't perfect. Okay? I'm not saying that. But for the first time, Aaron and I can say that we're exactly where God pointed. This is exactly where God pointed for us to be, and we're here. And this is where God's provision is for our life. So where's God pointing you today? Where's God's provision pointing you today? Because I want to tell you from experience, not from the book of Jonah, but from experience, chase what God has for you and not what you have for you. Chase the provision of God. And remember that sometimes God's provision feels a little peculiar. Let's pray. God, we thank you today for your reckless love. We thank you that you don't give up on us. We thank you that no matter how far away we run, you're always coming after us. We thank you for your son. We thank you for the gift that he gave us of salvation by dying on the cross, God. And God, we're so thankful for who you are. We're so thankful for an opportunity to come together and learn about your love today, about your provision, God. And today I want to pray for a couple groups of people. Those of you who raised your hand earlier and said, I'm going through a storm. I just want to pray specifically for you right now. God, I just ask that those of us who are going through a storm today, God, I pray that Jehovah Jireh would provide. God, we know that you can do exceedingly and abundantly more than we can ask, think, or imagine, according to your power, God. And so right now, if it brings glory to you, we ask that you would move in these situations, God, that you would provide, that you would be the Jehovah Jireh that you are. And I want to also pray, if you've never made a decision to accept Jesus into your heart, I want to give you that opportunity today. You want to step into right standing with God today. You want to bring Jesus into your heart so that you know where you're going on into eternity. If you want to accept Jesus, just raise your hand right now wherever you're seated, all across the room. Just raise your hand so that I know who I'm praying with. Hallelujah. Thank you. Thank you, God. If you raise your hand, just say a prayer like this. Say, God, I am a sinner in need of a Savior. God, I want you to come into my life, and I don't ever want to be away from you. I want you to be the Lord and Savior of my life. Today, I put my feet on a path, a new path with you. I believe you are the Son of God, and I believe that you died so that I could forever be with you. Thank you for that free gift of salvation. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's give God praise this morning for those salvations. Thank you. Thank you, Jesus. Well, friends, thank you all for being here today. Pastor John will be back next week to finish off our series on Jireh. So until then, go out and watch for those pointed provisions in your life. Amen. We love you guys. Have a great week.